Good morning. Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to breakfast in the class. I want to share with you something very beautiful today, and we're grateful, of course, as always, to our sponsors for breakfast. Breakfast in the class is dedicated to loving memory of Nishmat Farhi Yaakov ben Sarah and Rafael Nurani, sponsored by the Nurani family, Azak Baruch. As well, dedicated loving memory of Meir Ajami, Liuli Nishmat Meir ben Esther, sponsored by his son Isaac Ajami. Where are you? Where's Isaac? He's not here. Okay, maybe went upstairs. Also dedicated for speedy and complete Shlomo for Rabbi Farhi and dedicated loving memory of Liuli Nishmat, Mrs. Lily Safra, Leah Batchan, and philanthropy reached so many throughout the entire world. And the week of Cold Brew is sponsored by David E. Ash in honor of you and your substantial capacity to do good today and every day. My friends, I want to share with you a very interesting connection that is brought down in Sefarim. We know our rabbis always ask a question. Lama nismecha parasha zu? Why is this parasha connected or put next to this other parasha? The Torah is always trying to figure out the various lessons that are being communicated through the words of the Torah. But not only is that one of the ways that we learn lessons, but also from proximal connections. If you put one thing next to the other, it's there to teach you a lesson. Let me give you an example of this. The Gemara asks, Lama nismecha parasha zu? How come you have the parasha of Sotah next to the parasha of Nazir? Answers the Gemara, Mipnei, because haroeh Sotah bekilkula. If someone sees a woman who's messed up her life, she threw it all away on this illegitimate affair with someone else, the act of adultery, right? Yazir atzmo min hayayin. He should realize that probably some of these mistakes were made when someone did not have the full control of their mental capacity. They were drunk, they drank too much, etc., etc. So they should learn from that to make sure that they could control what they drink. Okay? So we learn that from the fact that the Torah put those two things together. The Chachamim ask, what is it that connects our parasha, Parashat Vayakhel, to Parashat Ki Tisa? If you remember from the end of last week, Parashat Ki Tisa ends with the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu covering his face because of the great light that shone. Now I want to just point something out I think is very interesting. The Torah tells us that Moshe came down, his face is aglow, ablaze with light. All right. In fact, Rashi says that the reason why it uses the word keren, reason why it uses the word which can also mean a horn. By the way, Michelangelo, when he created the statue of Moses, he did it with horns coming out. Why? Because the pasuk says, Ki karan pnei Moshe. Moshe's face was shining, but makrin in Hebrew means to shine. But the word keren means a horn. The myth that Jews have horns came from this, because non-Jews had never seen Jews, saw the statue of Michelangelo, and that propagated this myth, okay? However, Rashi says, why do we use the word keren or karan? Because just as a keren sticks out from the head, so too did the light of Moshe. It wasn't just that his face was shining on its surface, but it was so much, this glow, that it left the surface of his face. It was shining outwards. So we use the word makrin, okay? Now, keren. Listen to this. So what's the connection between keren and what comes afterward? Vayakhel Moshe, that Moshe gathered the people. So I want to simultaneously dance back and forth between the end of last week's parasha and the beginning of this week's, because I think the lesson is incredible, okay? Listen to this. Let's review. Moshe's face is shining. He comes down, the Jewish people see him, they're very afraid. This is some sort of crazy phenomenon. Is Moshe an angel now? What's going on? Is this going to be dangerous for them? They back up. Moshe calls them back to him. And he starts teaching them the Torah. Says the Torah, what happens because of this light? Moshe puts on his face masveh, a mask. Now, judging from the Pesukim, it would seem that the people were afraid, so Moshe put on a mask. What's the purpose of the mask? To cover his face. But to what end? What's the point? Sorry? Again, remember the context. The people are afraid, so Moshe covers his face to cover the light. Why is he covering the light? Because it's too strong, so they're too afraid. So he wears the mask, right? Simple. Here's the problem. The Pesukim then continue and tell you that Moshe, when he spoke to God, he would take off the mask. Then he would come back to the Jewish people and speak to the Jewish people without the mask. And when he would finish speaking to the Jewish people, he would put the mask on. Who cares what he's doing in his bedroom or the bathroom? What point is there in the mask when he's not talking to the Jewish people, when he's not talking to God? Did anyone ever ask this question? Rashi on the spot says something unbelievable. He says that the point was, it was not because of the fear of the Jewish people that Moshe covered up his face. If that was the case, he would have left it covered when he spoke to them, so they wouldn't be afraid. Rather, he says the exact opposite. The reason for the covering of the face was not for the fear of the Jewish people, but so that when he was not using the shine of his face to speak to God and speaking to Hashem without panim el panim, or in speaking to the Jewish people in a way where, if you remember what we spoke about last week, we talked about the idea that the fact that Moshe's face was shining was a proof that there was no other leader like him. The fact that his face was shining was a proof that the Torah was divine in the second Luchot, just like the first Luchot. So in speaking to the Jewish people, it was an important method of authentication. Do you remember how your phone, it double checks when you log into something? Is this you? Is this real? It was a method of authenticating the Torah of Moshe. So he needs his mask to be off. But when he's not using it, Rashi says that the shine of his face should not be used for nothing. Shelo yazunu, they should not merit, they should not enjoy the hadar karna, the glory of the shine of his face for no purpose. So he would cover his face when it was not being used. My friends, according to that, we are understanding here a tremendous lesson. The lesson here is that a person in their life is given many different things that they shine at, that they excel at. And the purpose of that talent and the purpose of that skill is in the time that it is being used. But when it is not actually actively being used, to walk around with that is to damage what you have. Just imagine for a minute. A person is speaking, imagine, right, just a simple example of this. Imagine instead of giving one class, two class, all day long I was giving a class. What would happen is eventually the people who are connecting to your words will get bored. They stop recognizing it they take it for granted. I remember once someone came to the breakfast in the class, and he sat to the class. At the end, he said, "We do this, you guys do this every day? Every day? Unbelievable. Wow. You get chizuk, you learn Torah. In this community, you pray, you go home. Maybe you eat a little breakfast, you go home. But to come, to learn, to get excited, to start your day the right, do this every day." When was the last time that someone walked into breakfast, you guys are here every day? Wow, we're doing this again today? Wow. Because if you have it every day, what happens? Eventually you start taking it for granted. When do you actually learn to miss it again? When you go away on vacation, you come back, you sit down in the class for the first time in a while, you're like, wow, I forgot how much I enjoyed starting the day with Torah, right? So what happens is that Moshe understood that if he did not cover his face, it would diminish what he had, what he was showing them, what he was communicating with them. My friends, sometimes the biggest thing that you could do is cover your talent up. Sometimes the biggest gift you could give is to allow space for someone else to shine, for someone else to achieve, even if you're better at it than them. Our rabbis tell us that there was a chain of transmission. Moshe would receive the Torah, and what would happen? He would then teach the Torah to Aharon. Then they would be taught to the Zekenim. Then the Zekenim would teach it to the Sareh Chamishim, Sareh Asara. Then to the Sareh Chamishim. Then to the Sareh, right? And then they would teach it to the people. There was a system where these people taught these people, these people taught these people, these people taught these people. Moshe Rabbeinu was obviously the best teacher in all of Am Yisrael. But as we learned already in Parashat Yitro, no man can do it alone. I don't care how talented you are. Rabbi, you might be the best rabbi. CEO, you might be the best CEO. If you're a CEO at work and you cannot let go of tasks in the office, you are underperforming. Now, you think to yourself, what do you mean? If I do all the tasks and I do all of them the best, then I know that they're being done to the highest level. Yes. But then you're also not doing critical things that only you can do. Never mind that you do better, but that only you can do. Those are now suffering because they're getting 10% of your attention instead of 50, 60, 70, 80% of your attention. Show me a man who can't delegate. I will show you a man who is being unsuccessful, judged by his own potential output. Show me a rabbi who can't share the podium with other rabbis. I will show you a man who is under-delivering to his community. Show me a micromanager. And by the way, micromanagers don't have to be rabbis or CEOs. Mothers, fathers can be micromanagers. If you are not trusting, if you're not letting go, then half of your bandwidth, whatever percentage of your bandwidth, is being taken up by things that you don't need to be involved in. You should not be involved in. Moshe Rabbeinu, after he was done with his job, he covered his face. Rashi is telling us so that his face, that people would not take for granted his karnehod. But I think there's something else there as well. Once the process of transmission begins, let me ask you a question. Be'ezrat Hashem, Mashiach will come tomorrow, even today. What's going to happen after the time Mashiach? All the great tzaddikim are going to be brought back to us. Let me ask you, when Moshe Rabbeinu was alive, do you think anyone's going to listen to breakfast in the class given by me? You're joking. Moshe Rabbeinu, Eliyahu Hanavi, Rabbi Akiva. You're going to see Shlomo Farhi will be speaking in the basement at... Now, I'm not going to have one person listening. And so it should be. But Moshe Rabbeinu understood if he can't teach and develop a personal connection with every person in Am Yisrael, so long as Moshe Rabbeinu with his full power is around, no one else is going to want to learn from anyone else. So what does Moshe do? He covers his face. Isn't that magnificent? To allow for someone else to have an opportunity to be able to do, to teach, to be. It takes a tremendous leader. I mentioned on Shabbat a powerful idea that sometimes the biggest thing that we could give is to stop giving. Imagine as a child, your child comes to you, tells you, please tie my shoes. Which father's going to say no? You have a lot of experience, you're an amazing shoe tire, you've been doing it your whole life. Kid comes, Dad, you tie my shoes, you tie it the best. I tie it, it comes out 3 minutes later. The way you do it, the double knot, put the rabbit ear, amazing, wow. Imagine if your child now is 25 and he's still coming to you to tie his shoes. You give, but unfortunately when you give sometimes too much and you don't allow the other person to do it badly at first and then improve, you rob from them the process of growth. It's not only true about tying shoes, it's about bailing your kid out in business. It's not true every time that the right thing to do is to bail your kid out. What do you mean, you're my father? Yes, to a degree. But if you can't learn from a mistake, because I'm always here to bail you out, how will you learn? My friends, so if that's the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu, so we come to the beginning of Vayakhel, and we're looking at this parasha, and we're wondering, what do these two things have to do with each other? And here, my friends, we come to the second lesson of this idea. I read once an incredible pshat. They ask, what was it that made Moshe Rabbeinu's face shine? We explained last week that HaKadosh Baruch Hu found it necessary to be able to let Moshe Rabbeinu's face shine. Why? Because he had to prove that Moshe was the best leader, nobody else should replace him. He had to prove that Moshe Rabbeinu, that these second luchot also came from God. Now, we gave a few different explanations. But there's one famous idea that says Not why did God do it, but how did God do it? God took from the leftover ink in the quill that he was writing the Sefer Torah for the Jewish people, the extra ink in the Torah, and he put it on Moshe's forehead, and from that, his face shone. And the Chachamim always ask, what do you mean there was one drop left in the quill? Did God not know how much ink it would take to write the Torah? I mean, obvious, if there's only one drop left, God got it like pretty right. Was he off by one drop? So the Chachamim say something amazing. In just a couple of weeks, we're going to read Parashat Vayikra. And in the beginning of Parashat Vayikra, it says, Vayikra el Moshe, my bar mitzvah parasha. My birthday was March 7th, the day of Purim this year, my English birthday. My Hebrew birthday is Kaf Chet Adar. Checks, donations, and presents should be delivered to one. Okay. My bar mitzvah parasha is Vayikra. I got the triple whammy for my bar mitzvah reading. It was the worst luck ever. Or the best luck ever, I'm not sure. As a kid, I felt that maybe as a rabbi, I changed my mind. 3 Sifrei Torah. Vayikra, I had Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, and Parashat HaChodesh. Nightmare. Amazing. Okay? In the beginning of Parashat Vayikra, the Pasuk says, Vayikra el Moshe, and God called to Moshe. If you look, you'll notice in every Sefer Torah that Vayikra has a small aleph. The small aleph was written that way. Why? Because Moshe Rabbeinu said to God, Vayikra is a term of endearment. You don't find it in many places. I don't deserve this euphemism of Vayikra that God called out to me in a term of endearment. Rather, I'd really rather it say Vayiker el Moshe. And Hashem happened upon Moshe. Coincidence, Mikreh. God says, Mehila. Who's God here, me or you? I said, write Vayikra. You have to write Vayikra. So what did Moshe do? He wrote Vayikra. But he wrote the aleph small enough, so if you're not looking carefully, what will you see? Vayiker. Okay? But Moshe, who wrote that out of his humility, wrote the aleph smaller than it should have been, which meant that there's a little bit more dio in the quill, a little bit more ink in the quill than otherwise. So the measurement of ink was perfect, but the leftover was something that Moshe had rendered redundant. And God took that humility, and that's what caused Moshe's face to shine. You know, a lot of times we think that people don't know, they don't recognize our achievements. So one of my favorite words in the world is a word called humble brag. Have you ever heard that? You never heard that? Yeah, humble brag. Humble brag, otherwise known in some circles as T4. Like a humble brag would be, so I think my luggage got lost on my private jet. That is an irrelevant element to this sentence. That's a humble brag. A humble brag is, I have a problem with perfection. So I have to usually get everything exactly done right. It's very difficult for me, but at the end, things really that I do come out pretty well. I'm just saying, I don't want to brag. It's just that I feel like I need to let you know. So if you ever need anything, you'll come to a guy like me who does things perfectly. But it's a problem that I have. You understand? That's a humble brag, right? So some people, they feel like they need to let you know of what they did, what they've accomplished, how much they're doing, how much money they give. You don't know. Rabbi, I'm the biggest tzedakah guy. Or people will tell you, listen, one of the things that's most important to me is anivut. Very important to me. Modesty is hugely important to me. Everything that I do, I don't tell anyone about. I'm not like these people who put their names on the wall. Nobody knows what I do. You know what I did yesterday, Rabbi? Nobody knows. Right? The guy who has his name on the wall, he doesn't need to tell you the name's on the wall. The other guy whose name's not on the wall, he has to tell you all the time. That's a humble brag. But the Torah is actually communicating with us the exact opposite. That a Moshe who's running away, whose anivut is so strong, what happens? God gives him something where he can't escape everyone recognizing that he's irreplaceable. How special, how wonderful he is. Unbelievable. And the only thing Moshe can try and do is put a mask on his face. But my friends, let me ask you. You see a guy with a mask on his face, you ask yourself, Why is Hadad wearing a ski mask? He's not robbing a bank. Sincere apologies for anyone who got triggered by the word bank this morning. Mechila. Not robbing a bank, he's teaching a class. Right? The guy leaves the class, puts on a balaclava. What's going on? Oh, with the light. There's nothing he could do to hide how special he is. So the pasuk over here is communicating to us. Vayakhel and Moshe gathered the people. Why? Why does it have to tell us that Moshe gathered the people? My friends, listen to this, this is so special. Al Chachamim explained to us that Moshe Rabbeinu was humble. And why was Moshe Rabbeinu humble? Because he saw b'nevuah, listen to this. Moshe saw b'nevuah that Shmuel HaNavi atid lechazer acharei Yisrael lehamid lahem batei din. If you read the Pesukim in Shmuel, you'll read that Shmuel was compared to Moshe. Right? Where is Shmuel compared to Moshe? Syrians might not know as well. Because Syrians don't say all the mizmorim before lechadodi. If you're Moroccan or if you're Ashkenaz, you should know this. Moshe v'Aaron b'choanav. Shmuel b'koreh shemo. Moshe and Aaron b'choanav. Here they're the priests. Shmuel b'koreh shemo. Shmuel amongst those that call out in God's name. It's interesting that you call Moshe and Aaron Kohanim, and Shmuel someone who calls out in God's name. Moshe didn't call out in God's name. The Chachamim explained that Moshe Rabbeinu saw Shmuel did something special. Shmuel didn't sit in Ramata, where he was born, and have everyone come to him. Rather, Shmuel traveled across the whole of Israel, from city to city, teaching the people, setting up a bet din in every city in Israel. That's what he did. Shmuel was a roadie. That's why the pasuk says, Moshe and Aaron b'choanav as his kohanim. But Shmuel b'koreh shemo. Shmuel, he went out and called about God's name everywhere he went. So Moshe Rabbeinu saw that Shmuel was not letting the people come to him, he was going to the people. So Moshe Rabbeinu felt, if that's the case, then Shmuel is even a bigger anav than me. He's shakul like me, but he's obviously better. Why? But he's obviously better. You're saying he's like, he needed 2 for 1. He's a bogo, all right? Okay, so Shmuel therefore was the cause of Moshe's anivut. Because what did Moshe do? Vayakhel. Moshe gathered the people to him to be able to teach them the laws. Masha'enke and Shmuel went out to the people. My friends, according to this, now we understand why there's a connection between Vayakhel and the end of last week's parasha. Because what was it that gave Moshe this ability to feel like he was such an anav? No matter what accomplishments he'd already achieved, he was able to find that Shmuel had done this unbelievable thing, that he gathered the people to him. He went to the people instead of gathering the people to him. My friends, it reminds me of the Igeret HaRamban. Igeret HaRamban was a letter he wrote to his son. Magnificent letter to read. It's a special sigulat to read it every day. It brings tremendous beracha. Anyone wants it. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's a beautiful kind of set point to set yourself on the right path every day. And I'm going to just quote to you one line that he says over there. He says, if you look at a person that's better than you, that has more than you, right? What should you say? You should look at this person and say, wow, look, this person must be better than me. Because you know what? HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed him in such a beautiful way. And you see a person who's less than you, you should say, wow, look at this person. He has less than me. Look at how he's struggling and he's doing the right thing even though he has less. The Igeret HaRamban teaches a person to be able to find something special in someone else, whether they're better than you, whether they're worse than you, whether they're Baal Teshuvah, whether they're a tzaddik, whether they were born religious, not born religious. Whatever the case is, a person could always be anav. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to look at every scenario and find, although there were things about Moshe that Shmuel didn't come close. So he could have said, you know what, I'm better than Shmuel. He found the one thing that Shmuel did that he didn't do, and he used that to be able to say, wow, Shmuel's obviously better than me. My friends, so what is the connection? Vayakhel. This is what Moshe used to be able to find the anivut. That anivut caused that there was extra ink. That ink caused that Moshe Rabbeinu's face shone. But because he acquired that through his modesty, through his integrity, his authentic understanding that this was his mission in life, he also was able to make room for other people. by hiding, by shielding himself, by sometimes not giving and allowing others to be able also to take part in that mitzvah. And I'll end with this. In the yeshiva in Radin, there was the yeshiva of the Hafetz Chaim, and there was a wall in the front, and it had the name of a certain donor, and then there was other names on the other walls. So someone once asked, "What's going on? What's happening here?" And they said the following. It's fascinating. When the Hafetz Chaim decided that he was going to build the yeshiva, he decided this was necessary, so he's going to go do it. So he went out. People started hearing that the Hafetz Chaim himself is running the building campaign. An elderly man and woman that lived in the city, they were very wealthy, but they had no children. So they came to the Hafetz Chaim and they said, "Listen, we have no children. We have no continuity after we pass away. We want that the yeshiva should be in our merit. We want to give, here's the money for the whole yeshiva." The Hafetz Chaim says, "I'm so sorry, I have to refuse your donation." They said, "What do you mean, Rabbi? You should go back to studying and to teaching. Here's all the money. Build the yeshiva. What are you wasting your time?" Rabbi said, to build the yeshiva is something that the Jewish people do together. They don't do it nobody does it by themselves. Everybody has to do it together. And because that's the case, he says, "I can't take your money." They said, "Rabbi, you're not allowed to refuse our tzedakah. We want to give the money to tzedakah. It's not up to you to decide who gets to do it." They're fighting with the rabbi now. The rabbi says, "Okay, I hear you." They said, "Well, we're going to take you to a din Torah. Ashrechem Yisrael," that this is a Jewish court case. By the way, who wants to go up against the Hafetz Chaim? By the way, I don't know, who are you going to get to represent you? They go to the Bet Din of Rav Yitzchak Elchanan Spector. Travel there, Hafetz Chaim, the guy and his wife, the elderly man and his wife, they present the case. And Rav Yitzchak Elchanan says, you can't refuse them the opportunity to give tzedakah, but also, it's also an idea that it should be built by the city, by the community. So why don't you sell them the one wall Mizrach, or 3 walls, and the other wall could be given by the community. Leave something for everybody else to be able to do. In that moment, they had all the money. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu want from them? Their desire was to give all of the money. But there was something even bigger that they could give. And that was holding back from giving a little, so there would be space for someone else to also have a part, to also have a zechut. Hashem should bless us to be able to raise people around us, at work, in the home, in the community, to trust, to allow space, and Be'ezrat Hashem, through that anivut, our efforts will be blessed. Baruch Adonai Le'olam.